Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back in another video day, and today the Houston Texans have traded away Khalil Davis to the San Francisco 49ers. Texans fan want to talk about the trade. I have mixed feelings about this trade for the Texans. Kind of like it, kind of don't like it. I like the depth that Khalil Davis has brought as a defensive lineman in 9 games. He has a sack, has 9 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, has a couple QB hits. So he hasn't been amazing, but as a backup, he's been pretty solid. 2023, he played 15 games, started 1, 2 passes defense, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 2 sacks, 32 tackles, 6 tackles for loss. This is a guy that's been a pretty good backup these last couple of years for the Texans. I've actually really enjoyed watching these last couple of training camps and preseasons, fighting for a roster spot back in last year's preseason and training camp in 2023, which was the big year where he had to be competitive. And then in 2024 as well, this past preseason and training camp, fighting to be on the roster again. So watching him fight preseason and training camp has been incredible because he played some great football in the last couple of preseasons for the Texans, and I thought he had a decent future with him continuing to improve, and he's still very young at 28 years old. But here's another thing. I mean, this is a guy the Texans really didn't have a lot of value on. I mean, it's not like they didn't draft him. They didn't sign him to any big money. This is a guy that the Texans signed from the USFL. This is a guy that really the Texans never really expected for him to be anything big for this team. They didn't. I don't think the Texans ever expected him to be a part of the team. Maybe they thought he could turn into a practice squad guy at the most, but he came in last year in 2023 and shocked some people in training camp and preseason. And then he did it again this past preseason and training camp. And it has led him to play 24 games in the last 2 years. And even though it was only one start, still went out there and did some good things, like at 3 sacks, 43 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 1 fumble recovery, 2 passes defense, 1 forced fumble. This is a guy the Texans signed for nothing. They didn't expect him to make the roster, and yet they get a 7th-round pick from him. That's not terrible. And yes, the trade deadline is over now, but the Texans could use this draft pick in the offseason as a trade piece to potentially land somebody in a trade, potentially, most likely. That might happen. This is a 2026 7th rounder that is heading to the Texans. The Texans already have such a good defensive line now, so I think the depth kind of gets a little bit worse losing Khalil Davis, but the Texans still have such good depth at the defensive lineman. I definitely didn't expect the Texans to be sellers at the trade deadline, getting rid of Cam Akers and Khalil Davis. Cam Akers, I don't think hurts too much just because how good Joe Mixon and Damian Pierce have been this year for the Texans. And Dre Ngwalaway has done pretty good as a receiving back. So, I'm not too upset about the players that were traded away, but I just expected the Texans to be buyers and not sellers. They weren't big sellers. They weren't buyers, and if they were anything, they were more sellers than buyers. They weren't big sellers. I mean, you saw some teams like the Saints and the Panthers and other teams really get rid of some players. The Raiders, really sell. But the Texans weren't like that. They just didn't do anything, and they did do something, and it was just getting rid of depth players. So let me know your thoughts on the Texans trading Khalil Davis to the San Francisco 49ers in the comment section, and peace out.